It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutch. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague, a man who never looks at his family like Aaron Rodgers looks at Christian Watson. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
It's comforting that after, it didn't seem to me to be a particularly lengthy off-season. I think the distance in time between Super Bowl and opening boot in week one went quite quickly. But it is comforting to know that in that short space of time, by my head, is that an awful lot of people in the NFL, especially head coaches, are still stupid and shouldn't be able to do their job.
Well, it's not that they shouldn't be able to do their job. They have proven that they can't do their job, which is epic.
I mean, I know by the time people listen to this, there's been 3 days of piling on, but this is just me, if my franchise had invested $250 million in a quarterback, I'd hope he could get 5 yards with about a minute left and 2 timeouts, rather than trusting the weediest looking player on the roster who shouldn't be involved in the game to win it for you. Me.
We will come on to that. I mean, you should also be able to, in the 3 times you get into the red zone in the second half, score more than 3 points. But then you wouldn't be a Russell Wilson / Seattle Seahawks game if it wasn't, weird and that. But luckily, I mean, if you're the Denver Broncos, you can defo give the Chiefs, the Chargers, and even the Raiders a head start, right? Why wouldn't you? But there we go. This week, Mainz events. We're going to give you some overreactions and some picks that we did. We're going to double down on and one we're going to take back. Neil's going to give you fancy darlings, fancy losers, and we're both going to give you a fancy prediction bound to go wrong. We know they're bound to go wrong because last week we went 0-2.
Spectacularly 0-2.
Yeah, I think personally, like, one of them could be stricken from the record, and we'll get onto that when we talk about it, but it won't, because that's not how we play this game. Just so you know, in my opinion, your fantasy prediction bound to go wrong is nowhere near as bad as your suggested fantasy loser. But again, we will get onto that. But without further ado, let's get on to the Mainz event.
Time now for the main event.
Neil, I think it's always one of them things which every talking head show does, and we're on video to each other talking heads, although obviously this is a podcast, and it's, we shouldn't overact to week one, but if we did, what would we overact to? So I've got 4, and one of them is probably the earliest we've done this conversation, because I believe we do it every single year, but we'll get onto that last. First one is one that's close to our heart, and one, let's be honest, makes us smile a little bit. Dallas is flipping done. Dak Prescott injured, out for 6 to 8 weeks. Just so everyone knows, before he was injured, which was in the fourth quarter, they were the most anemic offense in the whole of the NFL. Not hyperbole, just fact. This was a team that we've consistently been told for forever had a load of talent, and especially a load of talent on offense. That load of talent on offense has either got old, disappeared, or is nowhere near as good as they said they were. And now Dallas are, I think, going to be lucky if they're third in their own division, never mind making the playoffs.
The sunshine and lollipops and rose-coloured view that Dallas have placed on every single injury that occurred on Sunday is actually sickening, because it's putting pressure on these people to come back earlier than they're ready. Again, this is a situation where they're putting all the pressure on Dak Prescott, who, I stress, has lost his left tackle, had his favourite wide receiver taken away from him, not replaced, and this team paid an absolute shit ton of money to a running back. But let's put all the pressure on Dak Prescott to say, oh no, I think he could be back sooner than 8 weeks. So what you're saying is you're demanding he's back in sooner than 8 weeks, as evidenced by the fact you didn't put him on IR.
Correct, because I'm paying him.
This is just a theory as well. This isn't a theory, sorry, this is a question. Jerry Jeudy gets an awful lot of criticism because he hasn't exactly lit the world up since he came into the NFL. The quarterbacks that he's played with have not been stellar. Is CeeDee Lamb actually any good? Or has he just been luckier than Jeudy that he had a good quarterback for most of his time?
It's a really good point. Like, I think both of them were excellent, if not exceptional, in college. I think both of them were expected big things of. One of them kind of fell off the map, that being Jerry Jeudy. This year, CeeDee Lamb was like drafted as wide receiver 6, so like a first round wide receiver. I guess because the expectation was that he was the only person to target for Dak Prescott. What I would say is, if you watch that game back, there is a play late in the fourth with Cooper Rush where CeeDee Lamb absolutely destroys the cornerback, is wide open by 4 yards for like an 87-yard touchdown, it would have been, and Cooper Rush overthrows him and miles to the right. So I think there is talent there. What I would say is, and you know and I know this, being in the NFC East, all talent is in Dallas is talent times 10%, if 10 to 50% media bullshit. So, is he talented? Yes. Is he the 6th best wide receiver in the NFL? Absolutely fucking not. You could put forward a case, I'm only partially joking here, that he's not even the 6th best wide receiver in the NFC East.
All right, now you're just being silly.
There's two better in Philadelphia. That's a factual statement. There's 2 better in Washington. Factual statement. The New York thing becomes an issue.
This team, say, is going to struggle offensively because, as you say, they look dog dirt when Dak was on the field, and now they're going to suffer it. The thing in their favour is that it is a good defence. But the problem is that we saw last week it was a playmaking defence. It wasn't a shutdown unit. So if they have any type of flipping with their like luck of, you know, all the interceptions and fumble recoveries and sacks, if that drops off, they're in trouble. And, you know, as the gift says, you hate to see it, but more than that, you love to see it.
Yeah, this is a ESPN First Take Stephen A. Smith fever dream. And as someone who switched it on almost by accident earlier today, with him and Mad Dog and Marcus, who is a former Dallas player, getting absolutely bombarded. Yeah, as you said, you hate to see it, but then again, you love to see it. A second overreaction, Neil, is that the AFC South should be put in a bin and the playoff play should go somewhere else. The AFC South lost to Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, and each other. And someone is going to allow them to have a playoff place, whereas there's a possibility only 2 teams in the AFC West get in.
There's a few things to say that have emerged from this division of late. One you brought to my attention, I'll turn that over to you in a second. Lovie Smith, do you think he knows he's the head coach? Because some of his statements seem to indicate that he's reporting to someone else when saying, well, obviously the plan was for Dameon Pierce to get more touches. Well, it's your plan, Lovie. If that was the plan, why didn't it happen, dickhead? You know, who are you reporting to? I mean, Lovie Smith, don't get me wrong, that's a beard for the ages. But I don't think that qualifies him in the year of our Lord 2022 to be an NFL head coach. The other thing that emerged from this division is surely these players know about ties by now.
Truly one of the most unbelievable things that happens every year in the NFL is that some player will say, I didn't know that there was ties. Now, when you first started watching the NFL, Neil, ties never happened, right? They didn't.
No, very rare.
But in recent years, let's say 5 to 10 years, there's basically been a tie every year.
We saw one.
We did see, honoured to see a Washington-Cincinnati tie. Honoured, he says, inverted commas. I mean, we were staring in the face of 2 ties, really, this weekend. We got one. And Stephon Gilmore, who has been in the league forever, said, well, I was ready to play a second overtime. Fuck off. No. Sorry. These guys have playbooks thicker than, 10 bookshelves. And you're trying to tell me he doesn't know that there's only one period of overtime and it becomes a tie? I refuse to believe it. I'm not having it. Go away. In the bin. AFC South.
This division is terrible, though. I mean, I expect it not to be good and the Colts to run the table. But isn't the Colts... is there something back to 2014 since they last won on opening day?
Yeah, there was them and the Giants who had not been over 500 to start the season in the first week for a long time. I think even worse for the Giants, this was the first time since 2017 that they had actually been over 500 at all, or 2000, maybe it's 2018, I'm not sure. I think they made the playoffs in 17. But yeah, it's one of them, terrible thing. Next one. There was 2 opportunities here for me. It's the funeral march of the running back. Either CMC or Derrick Henry. Pick your poison. I went for CMC mainly because, people were picking him number 2 overall in this league. The only time he actually did anything in the game was when Baker Mayfield dropped it and he ran for 35 yards. But guess what? In fantasy, that doesn't count as 35 yards. He got 0 of them. This team has Baker Mayfield as its quarterback and knows that it needs to run the ball and has Christian McCaffrey, who is an all-purpose back and couldn't move the ball. That, I'd be okay, NFL Fantasy, okay, Yahoo, okay, ESPN, okay, Sleeper. I've just added CMC to the trade block. Any takers?
Matt Rule is doing a very, very good job of ensuring he gets booted out first. Clearly, he wants the Nebraska gig between him and Cliff Kingsbury, because this is the same man who fired Joe Brady for passing the ball too much, who came out with the absurd ratio for runs to passes last year, despite not having an offensive line or a ground game to do it. And then this season passes the piss out of the ball in week 1 against the Browns defense that beat the living piss out of Baker Mayfield. Matt, you're a moron. You're an idiot. So clearly you were told by the powers that be, you're going to pass the ball, mate. And you'll get fired either way. But I just don't understand. This team, the way it's built, as you say, concentrate the target tree. You've got DJ Moore, you've got CMC, and maybe you've got Robbie Anderson. I did not want to see Robbie Anderson dominate the targets. I did not want to see Christian McCaffrey relegated to the 3rd on that totem pole. But here we are.
Yeah, as you said, maybe Matt Rule can now say, look, we didn't run it enough times to win the game, so therefore I was right. Final one, Neil, and it's early this year. I've reviewed it, and I believe we have had this same conversation for 4 years in various different forms. I want to make this so clear. Just so abundantly clear. Kicking a football through a post is not fucking hard. It is not difficult. Do not let American people tell you it's difficult because a fella is running at you. That is complete and utter rubbish. There should be no, I repeat, 0 NFL kickers coming from the US because they cannot do it. They are not capable. It was proven this week. Get lost. You are not good enough. Justin Tucker is seen as a god because he can, do his job and kick it from 40 yards. Sorry, come and watch lads play footy on the Shankleys. I've watched lads consistently boot it over the bar from 40 yards every time they kick it. It's not complicated. Just get a 50-year-old centre half who's overweight. He does it every single game.
I maintain that the worst parts of any NFL game are kicks. Kickoffs are boring. They're pointless. You get a return, once a game, maybe? Punts, more often than not nowadays, you punt because you're a coward. It used to be to say fourth down was automatic punt territory. Now, Come on. Punt returns are exciting. Kickoff returns are boring and dangerous. I've no reason for them. I do think, as you say, it's the godlike worship that Justin Tucker gets. I think the people who speak of him in such reverential tones are the same people who clap when the airplane lands. He's just done his job. He's not after praise. He doesn't need to be lauded. He's just done his job.
What I love about it is these are the same people who think that the quote-unquote soccer is boring because they only score one goal. But then are like, oh my God, it's amazing he kicked it straight. Watch a rugby game. They're on the flipping sideline in wind, in flipping Cardiff or in fucking Perpignan and kicking it at an angle from different lengths through the middle.
Yeah, one stump to aim at.
Are right in the middle of the field and someone is asking them to kick it in a straight line and they can't do it. Can't do it. There was 11 kicks missed. How is that even possible? Games should evolve so we get better at things, and I'm pretty sure kickers are getting worse.
Well, we've had this discussion, as you say, various times, various points of the season for at least the last 5 years. It'll keep happening.
It's ridiculous.
It's our blankie.
It's ridiculous. Let's get on to the next bit.
Time now for the main event.
So we did picks over the last few weeks, Neil, and what I'm going to allow is you to have one pick back and one pick to double down on. So I'll go first. You get one pick back, which you wouldn't do now that you did at the start of the season. I said at the start of the season, the Arizona Cardinals will make the playoffs. Oh my God. What was I thinking? And in the overreaction sense, I know it is, and I know they played the Kansas City Chiefs, but what an abysmal performance for your first home game.
It's 2 games in a row against top-class opposition, admittedly, that they've been absolutely boat-raced and have never at any stage looked like they had a plan. I mean, good God, man. I mean, we knew DeAndre Hopkins wasn't going to play. Don't think anyone expected, Greg Dortch to become the second coming of Chris Carter. No, this team's garbage. Even defensively, they didn't look like they didn't have a clue. Offensively, it's so boring. It's so point to point. It's so static. If Kyler doesn't make pull a play out of his arse, the ball doesn't move. God, be gone. Fake Sharp Cliff, be gone.
Neil, what's the one pick you would want to take back from the start of the season?
Well, it's a tough one for me because the alternative doesn't look particularly good either, but I'm not so sure that the LA Rams are going to win their division based on the fact that their offensive line looked like a problem and Matt Stafford does not look healthy. So that would, of course, mean that someone else in the NFC West has to win the division, and that might mean that the 49ers play properly from now on because the Seahawks are not winning it and the Cardinals be shite.
I hear what you're saying, Neil. I hear what you're saying, but all aboard that Geno coaster. What I will say is, it was not great by the Rams. Again, they did play an excellent team in the Buffalo Bills. They were, I guess, tied at the half, but it was stale. It didn't look right, and, you know, Stafford looked really hurt or not ready anyway. I guess the question isn't, and I know the answer, and I'm sure you do too. If it all blew up now and Stafford never played again, was it worth it?
God, yeah.
Correct. Neil, which pick are you going to double down on from your picks at the start of the season?
This is the year that I'm finally right about the Minnesota Vikings.
A special performance, right? And Justin Jefferson, I don't know if you've heard of him. He was picked reasonably early in a draft. Scored 1 billion yards, and his team stopped throwing the ball around midway through the third quarter. What would Cooper Kupp do in a Cooper Kupp offense if he was more talented than Cooper Kupp? We may be about to find out.
Yeah, whatever he bloody wants, quite frankly.
What I would say to Green Bay on that is you may want to be in his general vicinity. There was at least 2 occasions he caught it and stepped backwards, back towards his quarterback because he was expecting a hit. He then turned around and noticed there was nobody within 5 yards of him.
Ben Solak pointed out there was at least 2 snaps where he was being covered by an edge defender.
Special.
Yeah, that's not okay. I mean, granted, he was toasting Jair Alexander. Jair Alexander's a professional cornerback. You're putting a pass rusher and hope to slow him down. Best of luck.
The MVP is a narrative award, and I know, and I watched. What was he? What rated quarterback was it? The 8th rated quarterback in Patrick Mahomes having okay showing according to PFF. Get that in the bin. However, the MVP favourite was Josh Allen, and has, again, if we talk about Ben Solak and Sheil Kapadia, if Ben described Josh Allen as what would happen if a velociraptor got hold of a machine gun, someone called him Cam Elway, which I did like, which is the running ability and power of Cam Newton with obviously the quarterbacking ability of John Elway. The classic line, it's his MVP to lose.
Josh Allen is, and this has always been the case. When he first came in, I was not a big fan. I was with Matt Kelly on this. He was athletic, but he was not a quarterback. But he's always been fun. Because, as I say, as good as he is, the blue smarties are just there. You know, he just wants to, just take and fire up the E numbers. He's still fun, but now he's bloody awesome.
You don't see that often, and it's fantastic. Anyway, that is the main event. Let's get on with the fancy portion of the show and talk fancy darlings.
Hello, darling.
2 picks last week from Neil. We went 1-1. Neil picked Jameis Winston, which was looking absolutely spectacular at half time when the offense had minus passing yards given a number of sacks. However, a fantastic second half performance, and I believe the first time we can move from chargering to falconing, and Jameis Winston finished 12th as a quarterback, so he's quarterback 1 with 21.7 points, 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. Neil's other pick was David Njoku, who, much like the Minnesota Vikings, Neil can't quit. I have called for special medical attention to remove David Njoku from Neil's brain. David Njoku was tight end 44. Yes, that means 43 tight ends scored more points than him. I didn't know there was 43 tight ends in the league.
Phrases I did not need to hear from Kevin Stefanski. We were really impressed with David's blocking. No piss off. Actually, get GTFOH.
Let's find out, Neil. Who do you want this week? Who's number 1?
Well, number one, and I can say this because it's not going to really bite me, and as much as I want my fantasy advice to help other people, if this goes wrong, I don't care. It's Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz last week, it was the full Wentz experience. There were breathtaking plays. There were plays that literally, as we've said in the past and accused Kirk Cousins of, there were moments, including throwing an interception on a screen pass. That was special.
And for anyone who's seen that screen pass, he was nowhere near his intended target.
No.
Who was 2 yards away from him. He probably missed him by 3 yards.
Yeah, the best outcome for that pass would have been an intentional grounding call. But still, he rallied. He had 313 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. This is the first game Wentz has had 4 passing touchdowns since...
I'm guessing when he played for Philadelphia.
The game he blew his knee out in 2017. And the most impressive thing about that is he didn't play in the second half of that game.
Of course he didn't, no.
No. So, he's playing the Detroit Lions. The Lions got boat raced last week by Jalen Hurts. Obviously, Hurts and Wentz are linked in some way. They're also different quarterbacks. But going back to last season and including last week, the Lions have struggled to keep fantasy quarterbacks in check. In their last 5, including week 1, they've given up nearly 22 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Washington surprised a lot of people by being quite pass-heavy. Whereas last week the Eagles were very run-heavy. Shock. But I think if they decide to keep Aaron out, then Wentz is another good option this week, especially if you're in need of help at the quarterback position.
It was my first Wentz experience as a purveyor of that football team. I don't like to use supporter anymore. And I did actually watch the game, which is not something I regularly do, but I was interested, so I had... that on a main screener and Red Zone on another. For the first time in a long time, there's a chance that Washington on offense will be fun and interesting. Now, that could be bad fun and wow interesting. However, things will happen. And for many years, Washington have played many games where nothing happened for them on offense. They have talented wideouts and a quarterback who can make plays and also can, do some of the most bonehead things that you will ever see from a quarterback. But at least it'll be interesting, I guess. I think I was speaking to Taib about from a Lions point of view yesterday on the Touchdown Review, which has come out today, and Taib was like, he was quite impressed with the pass rush, and the issue he thought and he believed was Jalen Hurts could move, and that killed the Lions. So it'd be interesting because Wentz ain't moving, whether that happens, but we shall see. Neil, who is number 2 in your fancy darling?
Number 2 in the fancy darling, it's a defence and special teams. It's they're an underrated contributor to most fantasy lineups. So I'm going to go with... I got burnt by this team last week, but I'm still going to say the Cleveland Browns because David Njoku don't play defense. Last week, their defense has always, I think, been an underrated strength of this team, especially in the last couple of years, especially because they've got Myles Garrett. He didn't play nicely against Carolina, and neither did the rest of the Browns. They had 4 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery. They're playing Joe Flacco and the Jets. I don't think it's a recipe for success in 2022 for Joe Flacco to be passing the ball 59 times. But here we are. Flacco historically has done quite well against the Browns in his career. Obviously, as a former Raven, he played them twice a year, and I believe he has more touchdowns against the Browns than any other team he's played. But in the words of the song, he last played them in 2018. He was ever so much younger then. Now at least I know him well. And we know that he's a statue, and we know he's going to get absolutely pummeled. They gave up 3 sacks last week to the Ravens. It's going to be bloodbath. So if the Browns are out there on your waiver wire and you're looking to stream defense, they are not a terrible option at all.
What I love about that, Neil, is that means the Browns will probably be 2-0. Which is kind of the narrative apocalypse that no one really wants, given, the quarterback situation and that. Also, I've been thinking about the Jets, and it may be just time to wind them up. And if you imagine that, like, you don't really get any success, and in the last basically 40 years, you've gone from having one team that had Dan Marino continually beat you to one team that had Tom Brady and continually beat you, and now you've got Josh Allen who will continually beat you, and all you ever do is pick quarterbacks who don't do that. Might be time to give it up, wind up the franchise, to move to one team in New York.
But Robert Saleh said they're not the same old Jets, which is exactly what someone who from the same old Jets would say.
That's it. He's trying. Yeah, exactly. Let's get on and let's talk fancy loser. Last week, Neil in his
fancy loser
in his infinite wisdom thought, and there was a logic tree to it, which after watching ESPN review about how much Derek Carr and Devontae Adams loved each other, wasn't going to work, and he picked Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams was the wide receiver 2. He had 10 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. What I would say on that is, in his first 2 drives, I asked Neil if he thought that he may catch 200 passes in that game alone. Talk of Devontae Adams' demise have been greatly exaggerated. He'd be fine. I tell you what, he'd do a great job in Green Bay.
Yeah, but he wasn't the wide receiver 1.
He wasn't.
No, win.
He wasn't wide receiver 1. That was Justin Jefferson with 1 billion yards against said Green Bay Packers. Neil, who is your fantasy loser this week?
Fantasy losers this week, tying in with Justin Jefferson, is Adam Thielen. Now, the Eagles defensively had issues against Detroit, mainly stopping the run. So when it comes to the passing game, they've still got Darius Slay, they've still got James Bradbury, who did have a pick 6. Justin Jefferson's going to get his. He is inevitable. He's like Thanos. But Adam Thielen, the peripherals from last week are not great. He only had 4 targets, 12.9% target share. He did catch 3 of them. But one thing that is worrying and one thing that has propped up Adam Thielen's fantasy appeal over the last few years is, while the targets have gone down, he's remained a red zone, end zone presence. He didn't draw a single end zone target last week, whereas Justin Jefferson had 2 and KJ Osborne had 1. Now, I know it's only 1 game and it's a small sample size, but if Adam Thielen's not getting the high value work, then he's seriously not someone you want to consider, especially not on a Monday night where you don't want to be sitting there saying, I could win or lose this game because of Adam Thielen. That would have been a cool situation in 2018, not in 2022.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting, and we've mentioned this before, that like for a lot of wide receivers, it's not a slow decline, it's a cliff. You're just in and then you're not. And I do wonder if Thielen's probably gone a year, 2 years more than many expected, and I do wonder if this is the year where it's just gonna go. We shall see. Let's get on with fancy predictions. Bound to go wrong. Last week, shockingly enough, consistent as ever in this segment, Neil and I were 0-2. I picked Derrick Henry to get over 25 points. That was a loss. He got 8.2, 82 rush yards on 3.9 attempt, and was clearly the slower and least effective running back in the room behind Dominic Hilliard, right?
Which is a worry.
Which is a worry. And that is, as someone who has dynasty stock in Derrick Henry, which I knew was reaching the end, I was hoping to get another in. It doesn't look like I'm going to. Neil highlighted that Justin Fields and Trey Lance will both be top 12 quarterbacks. There's an argument here that this should be null and void because they played in a monsoon. It also should be noted that I have brought this up many times, that people think that weather's cool in the NFL, and okay, yeah, but it just makes games completely and utterly silly. Let's move all games to Tampa or a dome. Sorry to Mark and obviously, God rest his soul, Chris Westling for that take. Neil, what is your fancy prediction bound to go wrong this week?
Because we have the advantage of recording on a Wednesday night, so we can actually talk about Thursday night football, my bold prediction is going to come from Thursday night, and that is that even after that game, once all is said and done, Gerald Everett will be the tight end one in week 2.
That man was very open, very much against the Raiders. I was more than impressed.
The weird thing about the Chargers in that game against the Raiders, no one saw more than 4 targets in the Chargers passing attack.
My eyes must be playing tricks on me. It looked like he had 10. But anyway, death, taxes, and Aaron Rodgers owning the Chicago Bears are things that are facts. He may have no wide receivers, but that's not going to stop Aaron Rodgers getting 40 plus fantasy points against the Chicago Bears in what could be one of the great Monday night blowouts of all time.
He just does it. It's Rodgers against the Bears. It's going to happen. He either absolutely annihilates them, or he leaves it to the last minute and silently slits their throat.
Amazing. And I expect the former rather than the latter this time. Neil, wonderful show as always. Earlier this week, one of us has got an anniversary and a birthday for his wife in the next 2 days. So poor planning on my part for them falling on a Thursday and Friday. Neil, before we get to them next week, where can people catch you?
Catch me on the Twitter at NNutton13. See my work at Numberfire, Rotoviz, and 4for4 Football. And also, don't forget to watch out for me on Sunday on the Twitter, posting the Jim Robinson photo whenever James Robinson does anything. I was so happy for that to come back.
I saw it appear and I was like, oh my God, it's back. So I just retweeted. I didn't even like slag it off or anything. I just thought, yeah, no, he deserves that one. He deserves it. I am at Mainz7. Come by me at Waxing_Lyrical. Touchdown review out just now. Some would say the producer may have forgot to post it earlier, but that cannot be confirmed. Talk with Callum, talk with Joe, talk with Thomas, talk with Taib about their teams, an overreaction for week 1, an upset for week 2, and a lock for week 2. Great stuff as always. Hour-long show, so sit yourself down. It's no Matt Kelly, but you know they're longer than I try and deal with. That is
she said.
That is it for this week. Fantastic show as always. Let you all go. Enjoy week 2, and these top guys are out.